Hello and welcome to this special edition of the Social Newsroom hosted by Dana Seda. We stand again for Mark Masai and also Willis Waburu. On this special edition, we want to discuss the situation in Gaza for the Palestinian people and also the entire of the Middle East with a hope to try and understand the cultures that are represented in that part of the world, kind of unpack the context and the reasons for the current situation, and hopefully also discuss some possible long-term and short-term solutions. Here with me to discuss this today, we are really honored to have His Excellency Hazem Shabat, who is the Palestinian Ambassador to Kenya. Your Excellency, it's a great pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much, Dan, for your invitation.
I wanted to go into our conversation. Before I do that, I know that there has been some escalation in the last 1 week. There's also been, on the other side, an outpouring of support from different parts of the world. We've seen people on the streets in London, in Jordan, people in Washington, D.C. We've even seen meetings here in Nairobi.
Yes.
And so maybe to start us off, I wanted to give you an opportunity to just give us your take on the situation and just your reflection on everything.
Yes, unfortunately, of course, these two past weeks have been an unfortunate escalation in the conflict that has been brewing for a very long time and developing over a very long time, over 56 years. So, yes, for sure, this recent cycle of the conflict and the violence we have seen has brought again to the attention of the world that this conflict still exists, still is not tackled in the right way. And it has brought together all the forces that are pro-peace and pro-justice around the world. Not necessarily pro-Palestinian or against somebody else, but it's all the forces and many of the political parties and the activists and the NGOs and civil society representatives around the world are all gathering to tackle this issue and to cast their opinion on this issue. That yes, we know about this conflict, we know enough about this conflict to realize that this has been a neglected issue for such a long time. And all the suffering that comes out of these cycles of violence to innocent civilians is because justice has not been served yet. So what you have referred to, the marches in European capitals or all the Arab capitals or in football stadiums or even in Washington or some activists here, people are finding this conflict very relevant to their life and to the future of their countries and to justice in general. So they are very much relating to it. They are not considering it as events that are taking place in a remote area or somewhere where they do not have relations or can connect to. No, everybody around the world is very much connected, and you working in the media realize that we are becoming more and more the global village concept is being implemented before our eyes, that there is no corner in the world that is remote or we are detached from at all. So that's why we've seen all this level of support and solidarity that we have seen around the world and continue hopefully to see that. But again, coming back to why did we see that this recent cycle of violence? The problem is the world and the international key actors have thought that they can continue to manage conflicts as business as usual. Right? We'll try to keep all the parties at bay. We'll try to, without addressing really the causes of the problem, needing to address it properly and implement the international community's own decisions on this conflict. This conflict did not start on the 7th of October. This conflict started almost a century ago.
Yeah.
It started basically just with, we and Kenya share a very, very similar history. Your colonial power was our colonial power.
Yeah.
The British were given mandate after the First World War to take over all the Ottoman Empire provinces and areas that are not purely Turkish. So Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, Jordan, all these areas that do not fall within the ethnic definition of Turkish areas. This is what the victors of the First World War clipped from the Ottoman Empire controlled areas and administrated it themselves and distributed among themselves. Under the pretext of preparing these nations who have enough sufficient administrative structures to be independent as states in a matter of 5 to 10 years or something like this. To our surprise, and the entire Arab world's surprise, and the region's surprise, the British had a different plan. They were promising European Zionist movements, the ones who believe in a common agenda for the Jews, and there should be a common future for the Jews, and they promised them to solve your problem, because they were facing oppression in entire Europe, under every regime in Europe, and under every empire in Europe. The Jews were, subjected to horrific acts, because the Europeans were seeing them as less of citizens as the rest of the fabric of the society. And we have seen cycles and cycles that, built up to the Holocaust. So they thought that to help aid this Zionist movements and to solve Europe's problem of the Jews and this continuous guilt, to give them a homeland somewhere. All right? That somewhere, by the way, could have been Uasin Gishu.
In Kenya.
In Kenya. And it's, for your followers, it's called the Uganda Plan, in which the British seriously contemplated on giving Eldoret, what we now have as Eldoret, to this Jewish people to come and settle somewhere and give them a state that they can run on their own and something like this. Now, fortunately for you, unfortunately for us, Palestine was chosen as the most convenient location for this, to solve this problem of the Jews in Europe, given the historical connection between, Judaism and Christianity and with Palestine. At the end of the day, Palestine was the cradle of many civilizations and definitely the three monotheistic faiths: Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. So that was the most convenient for everybody. Everybody, out of sentiment, no, Palestine would be better. This is where Judaism has existed, and this is where it was, and we go back to the roots. So the conflict of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, it's not a civil war between two components of a nation. It's not tribal rivalry, and it's not, in principle, a border dispute between two nations. It's between incomers, foreign incomers, taking over the land with the support and the blessing of the colonizer power, instead of our people, and at the expense of our land and our homeland, in which we have lived there for centuries. And for any follower, academic, be he or she, or even a researcher of any type, will realize that at no point in the history, in the past 200, 300, 400 years, was there any ethnic friction in Palestine, or frictions based on religion. Jews, Christians, and Muslims lived in full harmony, equal rights, equal ownership to their properties. There was no tensions. Everybody had freedom of practicing their religion. Synagogues were there, churches were there, mosques were there, equally respected and equally living together. So the issue, it's not Judaism against Islam or Christianity against Judaism or anything of that sort. It's about foreigners coming to take over your homeland and being empowered to do so by the powerful nations unjustly.
Yeah, I want to kind of go off from what you're just suggesting there. We know that every people has a culture and has a history that is theirs and that they hold on to and defines who they are. When you consider and reflect this history, the history of the Palestinian people, is it that you feel, because you're discussing something that's almost like erasure of your history and your existence? What are your thoughts on that?
Palestine, for anybody who looks at the map, Palestine is basically the connecting point between Africa, Asia, and Europe. That's why you had crusades campaigns throughout the years. That's why the pharaohs, for example, pharaonic civilization was invading that area regularly. That's why you had the Canaanites. That's the Philistines. That's why the Mongols, for example, invaded Palestine, and so forth. And so basically, it was the center of the world.
Yeah.
And that's why the term Middle East comes in play here.
Yeah.
We are not an ethnicity. Palestinians are not an ethnicity. We are an infusion of many ethnic groups over so long period of time. Okay, there are people who trace their ancestry all the way to Russia, all the way to Nigeria, all the way to France, all the way. We are an infusion of all of this. Now, the combining factor is the Arabic culture or the Arabic language.
Yeah.
Not Islam per se, which is still the predominant religion in Palestine, but Palestinians are Muslims, Christians, and we have also a minority of Jewish population within Palestine. Within Palestine, the occupied territory still has its own Jewish population that lives next to the Christian and Arab Palestinians.
I mean, so I wanted to also discuss a little bit about identity, and I like, because I've never heard that before, and it's nice for me to hear it. What do you see as the future Palestinian identity? Do you think it will still stay as this crucible of all these different cultures, or do you foresee that there might be more change?
Again, Palestine is a very special model. It has always been throughout history and will continue to be, and we will make sure, and the new generations of Palestinians will make sure it continues to be.
Yeah.
We are among very few countries in the region. I'm not going to give you an exact number, so to keep it at that, but that we do not identify the religion in our national ID. So if you meet Hazem and he shows you his ID, you wouldn't know
what is
if he a Muslim or Christian or Jew.
Yeah.
Or even or anything else. We do not measure the national identity based on the faith. And this is exactly the Palestine that has always existed there. And for sure, we're not gonna give up that marble that we had for many centuries. We're not gonna lose it at any point in our future.
Yeah. I guess one more question on the item of culture is, unfortunately, because of the media coverage over time, and especially in the last 2 or 3 weeks, a large section of the storytelling around Palestinian people has just been about the conflict. There's been very little discussed about the actual people. What's important to you, your culture, your art, maybe your music.
Yeah.
Maybe is there an opportunity, or is there a resource that we can go and find this type of expression of the Palestinian people?
Yes, there is many resources that you can tap into if you go on YouTube, and you're gonna see many things. And I agree with you. People only hear about Palestine. Unfortunately, the uninterested people only come in contact with Palestine in the context of news coverage.
Yeah.
And news covers only when something wrong happens, but something doesn't go wrong every day, all the time, to be worthy of international attention.
Yeah.
So we have a very vibrant society, very rich artistic scene, from all types of traditional music and dances, all the way to techno music DJs who are very renowned across the region, to musicians who play different types of music, from jazz to everything, We have even our jazz lounges and jazz bars this is the Palestinian society. And unfortunately, mainstream media only pays attention to Palestine in the unfortunate context, and only from a single lens of war and military actions and so forth.
So maybe let me change subjects a little bit here. And you've given us a little bit of a context from what you called the Uganda project up until here. And if you kind of made this history and say what's precipitating the current situation, where would you begin to chart that? And I'm not saying that all the older history is not important. It is very, very critical. I'm just kind of trying to peel back and look at the layers of what has precipitated what we've seen since October the 7th.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, of course, if we're going to jump into history, yes, Israel was established in 1948, engineered basically to be established in 1948 based on foreign immigrants, as I told you. And of course, this was not acceptable by the owners of the land and the indigenous people. We are the indigenous people. So conflict continues to exist between all Arab countries and the Palestinians, of course, among them, against this newly alien established state in the region. 1967, another war had happened, and the international community interfered very clearly and very strongly and said, no, Israel is not entitled to exist in any point beyond that 1967 borders. So anything that it has occupied since 1967 war is an occupied territory, unrightfully occupied territory, and it should withdraw from that. This has not been implemented. It continued to be a recurrent resolution in the United Nations. The vast majority, the overwhelming majority of the international community support that and votes in favor of that, including all the European countries, all of Asia, or only very few, 9 or 8 countries who, for proxy foreign relations, does not support that. But even the United States has made that jump in 2016 during President Obama time. And we had a new renewal of Security Council resolution saying exactly that again, and that all the settlements that Israel is building in the Palestinian territory are illegal and should be dismantled. Clear decision that even the US did not object to that. So the law on the Palestinian conflict is very well defined. Any action that Israel has taken against our people since 1967, which is 56 years ago, is illegal, and the building of settlements is a war crime. No occupying nation to another nation can transfer their population into the occupied territory. This is the international law.
Yeah.
So all these violations over a extended period of 56 years, of course, creates friction.
Yeah.
Especially when you engage since 1993 in a peace deal in which we said, fine, this is becoming a reality. Israel is a reality. We are recognizing that. What we want for our people is a better future. Extending the conflict indefinitely is not a goal in itself. What we want is the rights of our people to be observed.
Yeah.
So we made an unprecedented compromise in which we accepted basically that Israel should exist in peace and security and full recognition from us, and we put this in black and white, on 78% of the territory of entire Palestine. The indigenous people, the Palestinians, will only keep 22%. And we started the peace negotiations to split up into a 78 Israel and 22 Palestine, and the conflict should end, and we end up as neighborly countries living side by side. And over a period of 5 years, we should disengage this very intricate occupation system, which basically dominated what we eat, what we drink, the hospitals, the schooling system, everything was controlled by the Israeli military. So you needed a period of disengagement, and our economies and how we're going to trade and through which channels are we going to trade together. All these things needed a period. Think of it as the modern history, for example, Brexit. Brexit did not take place overnight. You needed a period in which institutions would sit and figure things out, how we're going to be dealing with that legally, financially, and at all levels. That period, that peace process was supposed to last for only 5 years, in which it should have ended in the end of the occupation and two nations living side by side.
Right.
That should have ended in 1999.
Right.
From 1994 till 1999.
Yeah.
How far are we from 1999 until today?
A long time.
Exactly that. Has Israel's occupation changed? No. It's becoming more entrenched. More territory is being annexed. More houses are being demolished. More people are being killed. More people are being unlawfully arrested into Israeli prisons. So basically, Israel has sent a very clear signal that the intention is not to end the occupation. It's just pure tactics to prolong this occupation as long as possible and to continue to dominate the entire geography, and with it, the entire population in it, in a two-tier system. Citizens of Israel and non-citizens of Israel, to which basically last year, two of the most prominent human rights organizations, Amnesty International and the Human Rights Watch, both issued very, very elaborate reports. You will find them on their websites for anybody who wants to check it out. They both made a study on the situation in Palestine, and both of them surprisingly came to the same conclusion. That the system that exists in Palestine now is clear-cut apartheid. So we are living in a world in 2023 in which we are still hearing the word apartheid, and apartheid is being resurrected again after we have all managed to end it in South Africa.
And on the topic of apartheid, Nelson Mandela in a previous interview said that he did not believe that the world was free until Palestine was fully free.
Exactly.
And he said that he believed in the fundamental right for self-determination.
Exactly.
That's something you totally agree with. How do you think, what is the path for us to get there? That is the question now, given the situation that we have and the recent unfortunate escalation. In your mind, what is the path that we can get us there?
There is only one path. It's implementation of the law. Madeba, when he said that, he was basically commenting on the law. This is what international law says. All nations have the right to self-determination. This is what Kenya exercised. And this is what you got your independence based on the principle of your right to self-determination. South Africa, they defeated apartheid based on the concept and the principle of self-determination. We are the people, and we have the right to decide how we are going to live, not somebody else dictate that for us. This is in the United Nations Charter. This is what the advanced world and the Western world and what came to agree as principles. If they are not going to slip back again to the atrocities of First World War and Second World War, that we should put some rules and principles that are applicable on anybody. And anybody who violates that, we should all be united to make sure that we bring that defiant entity into conformity with the law. This is basically international law. International law that you, as Kenyans and Palestinians, we did not draft that. It was drafted by the victorious powers of the Second World War. So these are the principles that the authors of have not even applied when it came to the Palestinian conflict. Our surprise is that they find it applicable everywhere else, and they make reference to it everywhere else. But when it comes to the Palestinian conflict, this is where they turn their blind eye and act as if international law is not applicable.
Yeah. And I'm going to ask you a little tricky question now. I know that you are the ambassador to Kenya and you're representative of the Palestinian National Authority, who are, the world recognizes you as the people who represent Palestinians. But some of us have just been hearing the word Hamas and Hezbollah and these other terms. And I know it's not easy to separate these things, but would you give us a quick tutorial on all these, on especially these two bodies? Because we are, the first casualty in a war is the truth. And so right now, everything is Hamas. And so it'd be nice to understand from you how you see these different entities.
Yes. I am the representative of the state of Palestine, a state that was recognized in 2012 by the United Nations. So we are a state, but we're not members of the United Nations. A status that even Switzerland did not enjoy before 2004, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
All right? So even till 2004, Switzerland was not a member of the United Nations. It was a state that everybody recognized. We have 135 countries recognizing the state of Palestine.
Including Kenya.
Including Kenya, and we have diplomatic relations, and I'm sorry, you have an ambassador that's covering Palestine from his office in Cairo.
Yeah.
And so the entity is definitely there, and it has a government, recognized government, president, and a cabinet, and institutions.
Yeah.
Hamas is not part of that formation, but it's part of the Palestinian political fabric. Hamas is a group more radical than all the other components of the Palestinian society. They believe simply that occupations around the world throughout history have only been tackled through the use of force. Peaceful means will not necessarily yield the results and the aspirations of our people. So their whole ideology is based on Israel is an occupying state and we should fight it until it stops being so.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not a spokesman for Hamas, and this is not my role. But given that they are Palestinians, I will continue to elaborate more on this thing. Yeah. Hamas's actions so far over there, they have, they started existing in the mid-80s, have only tackled Israel. They have no other targets other than Israel. So for me to accuse them that they're not fighting the occupation, that would be inaccurate from me. So it's their only target is to force Israel to relinquish its occupation regime over the Palestinians. Now, their tool to do that
is military.
Is military means. And again, the United Nations Charter has given all occupied nations the right to defend themselves with all means possible. And again, if I'm going to relate to Kenya, Kenyans also used arms and violent means to force the British to end their colonial control over Kenya. So an occupier will not wake up one day with a bad conscience and say, no, I think I'm being too unfair to these people. I think that I should give them their rights back.
Yeah.
They will not do this. Unless they are forced to do that, they will not wake up one day with the right conscience.
Yeah.
We have seen it in the African independence struggle. We have seen it
history.
And we've seen it in India. We have seen it everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
It's a historical reality that we have to recognize. Yeah. We have seen it in apartheid South Africa. Apartheid did not wake up one day to say, oh, yes, these guys are right, and we should really listen to them, and we should really give them back the power over their own life. It's when the entire world was pressuring them to the point that they could not continue in the same path that we saw a different result. So Hamas is using the military means. Now, for the Palestinian government, which is the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, basically, sees things differently. Believes that we have lost enough victims to this conflict that it should not be a goal in itself. We had enough confidence in ourselves, in our allies and friends around the world, and in the international legal system, that I can battle this occupation through legal means and not military means. The Palestinian government has almost 60,000 armed men under their control, but these people are not engaging in military combat with the Israelis. Because we are not going to tackle it through military means. We believe we have the moral superiority in this conflict. We have the legal grounds to achieve what we need without using violent means and without shedding more blood or causing more, agony, not for us and not for the Israelis, of course. Because at the end of the day, we are going to end up neighbors. Now, in 10 years, in 50 years, we are going to wake up one morning as neighbors. So we are doing this as an investment in the future. So as for Hezbollah, for example, Hezbollah is not a Palestinian group. That's a purely Lebanese group that also has their opinions on Israel's occupation to different, because Israel was an occupier of Lebanese territory, is an occupier of Syrian territory, it was occupier of Jordanian territory, it was occupier of Egyptian territory. So basically Israel has been a very hostile state since its inception. It did not come in peace and say, please, I want to live around this region and among the countries of this region in peace and security and observe. No, it was an aggressive state that was established by a war. The 1948 war was basically these immigrants that came with their guns and machine guns from Europe and took over the lives of the villagers. And so the establishment of Israel was by use of force and military means. They did not come and blend into the society and they were casted away. No, they came as a very distinct composition of the society, living in ghettos and kibbutzes and stuff like this. And when they saw that they have enough power and to take things into their own hand, they just kicked out, expelled basically 2/3 of the Palestinian population in 1948. You walk into the streets of Israel today, you're basically passing the houses of the Palestinians. We still hold the deeds and the keys to the doors of those houses till now. So it was a state that was established on the lives of the Palestinians, which was not an empty territory or just empty hills. It was a very elaborate and civilized country with cinemas, with theaters, with schools. We have schools that date back more than 120 years and a very, very elaborate cultural scene. All of this existed. So Israel did not come from thin air or suddenly just pop out of thin air. It basically took over what was existing and continued to build on it.
The African Union has, at the beginning of the escalation, was released a statement that was very firm, that they saw that the context of this conflict was precipitated by the occupation. And in many ways, that was a unique perspective from a body that big in the global politics. But also there's been a lot more support in the global south, the African, kind of Latin American, global south peoples with the Palestinian cause than there's been in the global northern cause. What do you think is the reason for that?
Because Africa cannot act against its own identity. Because I'm sorry, if you consider that international law is not applicable, if you consider that people's rights to self-determination is not really a big thing and whatever, and it's not an issue that should be really followed through or something like this, what does it say about the entire African continent? What does it say about the struggle of the African continent? What does it say about the struggle of different political groups who picked up weapons and fought their occupiers, enduring very harsh treatment from their occupiers and their colonizers over a very long time? What do we consider those? What do we consider the Mau Maus? If I tell you the Mau Mau, what does it come to your the first thing that comes to your mind? A hero?
Right now, but back then they were classified.
By who? Classified by who?
By the colonialists.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, do we want that this conflict be settled in the streets and from the end, the wrong end of a gun barrel?
Yeah.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be like this. But history has taught us that colonial powers, they do not listen until they are forced to.
And I guess maybe if we could turn and look into maybe your crystal ball of what we could look at to the future. Going back to your point earlier that in the end we Palestinian people and Israeli people would end up as neighbors. What do you think are some of the steps that can be taken? Just starting from where we are now. The world currently is pushing for a ceasefire. So maybe that's step one. And then they're allowing for humanitarian aid into Gaza and the West Bank. What do you think would be the next kind of political steps to get us on the path that we want to go on?
Ceasefire and medical aid or humanitarian aid, this is something that has to do with the immediate suffering and the massacres that are taking place in the Gaza Strip now. These two issues are not related to the solution to the conflict. The solution to the conflict is very simple and very straightforward, and it is simply pick any international decision that is taken by all the powers of the world, by all the nations of the world. Any decision. We have almost 800 decisions on the Palestinian. Not one has been implemented. Israel has not been made to implement a single one of them. Just, let's put it this way to simplify it to the viewers. I came here and took over the studio, unlawfully. You're the owner of the studio. You have your license, you have your all the registration and so forth. The court, we go to court, you take me to court, and the court says, no, you are the rightful owner of this land or this property, and Hazem is an invader, and he has no right in this property whatsoever. If no policeman comes and knocks on this door and drags me out of it, how long will that situation last?
So you're suggesting that the international community...
Exactly that. Implement international law.
Yeah.
We have seen the international community, or the superpowers, let's put it this way, act decisively in other conflicts that existed around the world.
Yeah.
They say, this comes into violation of international law, or country X has committed a war crime, or this example or that example, and we have a huge chest of tools, legal tools, and peaceful tools in which countries are brought to comply.
Yeah. From
economic sanctions to embargoes to military, efforts, interventions, to boycotting and cutting diplomatic relations. We have a huge chest or toolbox full of tools that we can always use. All of them are, the vast majority of them are peaceful, but they were made and they were put there to make sure that the defiant entity of international law is brought to comply with international law.
Yeah.
But the impunity with which Israel has been treated for over 56 years has resulted in what we are saying we saw in these 2 weeks.
How do you approach the United Nations? Because there was a vote in the United Nations last week for a ceasefire, which was unfortunately vetoed.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the Secretary General has called for a ceasefire. And they themselves were, if I'm not mistaken, he was at the
Rafah crossing.
Crossing.
Yes.
The other day, advocating for there to be humanitarian aid allowed in.
Yeah.
You're disappointed in the situation, for sure. Yeah. How much do you hold the United Nations as a body responsible for the lack of action?
Again, the United Nations as an organization is a speaker that transmits the input that goes into it. Mm. And this input comes from the member states and from the Security Council and the will of the General Assembly. So what the countries agree on, this becomes the mandate of the United Nations. The United Nations is not the government of the world that is above the sovereign will of the nations.
Yeah,
it's basically vice versa. It's the organization that translates and oversees that the will of this nation, what the people, the nations have agreed on, is implemented and seen to be implemented in the right way and reflects the laws that have been agreed on with by these countries.
Yeah.
Now it's the same countries that are custodians of peace and security in the world are the ones who are utilizing that power that they hold to basically endanger peace and security in the world. Russia had presented a draft resolution that was voted out. Brazil, another responsible country, presented another resolution asking for ceasefire, not blaming anybody, not asking for anybody to be punished, that there is human life at a very huge scale, with huge devastation taking place. And our responsibility as members of the Security Council is to make sure that first this stops, and then we sort things out, and we find who's to blame and who's to not.
Yeah.
Even that did not fly, because it falls within, it's against the interests, for example, and in this case of the United States, that wanted to prove friendship to Israel by giving them furthermore impunity to continue to act above the law.
Yeah. I was just checking your historical contributions earlier, that Switzerland only became a member in 2002.
Small
correction there. But then also that the UN did recognize the PLO all the way back in 1974. So that's actually quite interesting that they also need to consider that. Locally in the Kenyan political scene, there's been maybe a mixed reaction. There's been, I don't know what our government's formal position is. I know that there was, I think so far it's been silent. I know there was a statement released, but it's also disappeared. But I know that yesterday there was meetings here locally by local activists who are advocating for your cause here. And also there's been statements by opposition leaders in Kenya saying that you have a right to, same thing that the African Union was saying, you have a right to self-determination. And also the ambassadors of Arab countries have also written a statement here.
Yeah.
Considering the relationship that Kenya has had with Palestine all this time, what is one of the things that you wish the Kenyan government or the Kenyan people could do to help your cause?
Kenya can play a very important role that really matches the potential that it has and the long-term solidarity and understanding of the Palestinian cause. Okay, so with Kenya, we have a very long record of solidarity and understanding of the Palestinian plight, the Palestinian rights, okay, and have always been very consistent with regard to their legal obligations as a nation, Kenya's legal obligation as a nation, that they act responsibly, that they do not encourage or provide coverage for Israel's illegal actions. Now, unfortunately, this time we have seen a position, which of course, at the end of the day, it's a sovereign position, but that fails to see a long history of Kenya's own calls to Israel to abide by international law.
Yeah.
So if I have a country that is violating international law day in, day out, making people's life literally, and I quote the European envoys, intolerable. If you make the life of any community, any society, any neighborhood, or even your neighbor to the point that it is described diplomatically as intolerable, what do you expect the result to be? If you deliberately do these actions over a period of 56 years, day in, day out, killing civilians, prisoning them, demolishing their houses, annexing their lands, destroying their livelihoods and confiscating their farms, and dictating what we eat and what we don't eat, and when we go out, and who reaches a hospital and who doesn't reach a hospital. All of this is part of our life. We are controlled by Israel's military on every town. To go from one town to another, you will have to cross an Israeli checkpoint, and they are the ones who decide if you can pass or not on your own territory. Not in Israel. I'm not speaking about Israel, the internationally recognized Israel. This is not what I'm speaking about. I'm speaking that the territory that is not Israel, that the international community, including the US, EU and its member states, Japan, China, Russia, Brazil, Argentina, Chile, South Africa, Tanzania, all these countries, in that territory that they do not recognize as Israel, I have to get the approval of an Israeli soldier that has to wave to me with his gun if I can go, or I turn back and I'm not allowed to go to reach work, or to reach my university, or to reach a hospital for medical care. I am subjected to that for 56 years. That's not sustainable. So basically, Kenya had always known this.
Yeah.
It's not strange for Kenya. And I still continue to believe that even the statement that you're referring to, it had these components maybe further down in the statement, but I don't think that the priorities should be shifted here, because that's exactly the problem. If you change the priorities from ending the conflict and achieving comprehensive, peaceful end of the occupation, you will not have a lasting peace, and these cycles of violence will come to burst in our faces every now and then.
Yeah. There's a statement that we've seen online that has been, many people who are supporting the Palestinian cause have said it, but other quarters of the world consider it a little bit of an incendiary statement. It's from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And people feel as though that's a declaration of a different border or a reorganization of the borders. What's your understanding of the statement, and what's your alignment?
Yeah. When you keep things in its abstract format, you give people the right to come up with their own formats. You remember the 78-22% that I've agreed on. Because Israel does not want to implement this equation of keeping 78 and giving 22%. Now you're giving the right to new generations to come and say, fine, we've tried to convince you for 56 years, then I have the right to my ancestral land, to where my grandfather was born, to where my house was built, and I have the title deeds for that territory. Until today, we own it, and it's registered in the United Nations, the Palestinian properties inside today's Israel. So basically, if you don't want, and you don't want to settle, and you're not finding the peaceful settlement of the conflict useful, fine. We can wait 2, 3, 4 generations. Nothing stays the same, and no power stays the same, and whatever. This is one. And that's why we hold Israel fully responsible for everything that has been happening for the past 56 years, until today. Until this very day that we're sitting together, Israel is the only entity that is responsible. Had they respected international law, had they respected their commitments under the Oslo Agreement, and ended the occupation peacefully at that time, the Middle East would have been a very much different Middle East than what we see today.
Yeah. So, and I'm just going to ask you one last question, because I know we've had a really good conversation, and once again, thank you for being here. As we the world is going to start to deal with this new reality, one of the things that's been a critical move out of the narrative has been the mobile phone, and how the Palestinian people have used the storytelling of the mobile phone to shift narratives around the conflict and narratives around even just daily life. What else do you think has been a shift of the narrative in this cause? Because for a long time, Palestinians were seen as the aggressor, but over the last few years, that seems to be changing.
I will respond, but in three different points. First of all, I just want to make a follow-up to the previous question. Israel has no borders until this very day. If I ask any nation in the world, or any official, or any school students, can you please draw me the map of Kenya? You will tell me it starts with this. Yeah. They will draw it.
Yeah.
Israel, until today, has no designated borders. They do not have recognized borders. They themselves do not have borders. They have no constitution in which it has borders. Until this very day. So it shows that what's happening is not by chance or by mistake or a misunderstanding. If a country that has existed for now 75 years and until today, they have not marked where their borders are, this indicates that the mentality is an expansionist mentality, and the world is tolerating it. Give me one country around this globe that does not have borders.
There's none.
Israel is the only one. They can have conflicting, a conflict on the border, or challenge on a territory somewhere in here. But Israel, the state itself, does not have borders. It does not say that our border starts from the Mediterranean Sea to this point in the north, to that point. They do not have that. This is one. Secondly, with the narrative.
Yeah.
I disagree with you that people thought that the Palestinians were the aggressors. No, this is not correct. I'm sorry. China, India, Russia, all of Eastern Europe, basically, 22 Arab countries, African Union and its member states, the vast majority of Latin American countries. I don't know if you want Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, Sri Lanka. I don't want to miss somebody. No, if you ask anybody, we are not the aggressors. Everybody else in the world were. The problem is we had a huge gap of information. We have a new generation now. I don't know, should I call them the millennials now, or I don't want to be in Generation Z, and the millennials, basically.
Yeah.
That they came to be aware of politics in a period that was very gray. They don't have the history.
Yeah.
They came into something that, there is a peace talks between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Oh, that didn't work out. So now they are fighting. Okay. And that's why we believe that ignorance is our worst enemy when it comes in the Middle East. If you are not sufficiently educated, you don't have to be an expert, but you have to have at least the basic facts to know them so that you make your own opinion. People always say, be pro-Palestine. I don't want you to be pro anything. I want you to think for yourself. Read the facts, not the propaganda. Don't listen to me as an ambassador of Palestine. Don't believe anything that I'm saying. Go check the facts yourself. And don't check it from a Palestinian source.
Yeah.
Go check it from Harvard University sources, from the US State Department sources, from UN sources. These people are the drafters of these documents and this literature are not Palestinians, and they're not pro-Palestinians as such. But there are principles that they cannot violate when they are doing the reporting if it has to be a reputable document. Go visit those sites and read about the issue and make up your own mind. What do you believe in?
Thank you.
Well,
Your Excellency, it's been a pleasure to speak to you today.
my pleasure. It was my pleasure for sure. Thank you.
And look to host you once again in the future, maybe under happier circumstances.
Yes, and we speak culture then.
Yes. That's it, everyone. It's been a pleasure. This is Dana Seda standing in for Mark Masai. Until next week. See you.